Now, also last night, the Prime Minister made an oblique reference to the ABC, you know, that taxpayer-funded juggernaut of left-wing propaganda. Have a look.
I mean, in between elections, Australians basically just get on with their lives. And frankly, probably the less they'd like to see of politicians, the better in between. And I get that. And I actually like that about Australia. They're constantly not agonising and talking their country down. Yeah, there's plenty who do that, but they're on other programs.
Yeah, there's plenty of self-loathing on Q&A and other programs right across the ABC. Afterwards, in the post-mortem, Mark Latham made the point that the Prime Minister and the Coalition are to blame for doing nothing to rein in the ABC. In fact, they've just handed them a budget increase for each of the next 3 years. That's a good point from Mark Latham. Let me show you another example of how the ABC is out of control, showing bias and showing utter contempt for reality and facts. Last night, the Media Watch program, run by that anti-journalist Paul Barry, did what it usually does. It spooked climate alarmism and attacked News Corp.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And in 2020, it was bushfires like we'd never seen before. In 2022, it is floods, among the worst in living memory.
Well, the fires were not the worst we've seen. As I keep pointing out, horrific as they were, we've lost more lives in bushfires across at least 6 summers dating back a century. And we've had fires start earlier in the season and burn larger areas. And as for the floods being the worst in living memory, that's not true either. The flooding was worse and more deadly in Brisbane just over a decade ago. And then there were the historic Murray River floods of 1956 and 74, with many lives lost in Brisbane in flooding in 74 as well. And that's not to mention much more devastating floods just outside living memory, 90 or 100 years ago. Still, these are mere facts. But Barry was more interested in Scott Morrison sharing the same feelings.
In case it wasn't clear what he meant, Mr Morrison explained.
We are dealing with a different climate to the one we were dealing with before. I think that's just an obvious fact. And Australia is getting hard to live in because of these disasters.
So, was his blunt acceptance of the risks of climate change welcomed by the apologists at News Corp, who supposedly saw the light last year with this announcement?
Climate of change.
Mission Zero.
Now, let's get this straight. Paul Barry wants all News Corp commentators to make the same unproven climate alarmist claims as the Prime Minister because the News Corp organisation made an editorial commitment to net zero emissions. So Barry's urging people to A, ignore facts and go with the zeitgeist, B, all follow editorial directions from their employer, and C, all express the same workshopped view. If the ABC works like that, it's an affront to free speech and journalistic ethics, and I certainly would never work like that. This is incredible from Barry. As I say, it's anti-journalism, it's anti-intelligent debate. But of course he was on a roll last night, attacking his usual targets, expressing regret that we don't all think alike.
Sadly not. As South East Queensland and Northern New South Wales drowned in mud, the Australian's Chris Kenny had told readers,
They are not new. Floods, droughts, fires, heat waves and storms have always been with us and always will be, especially in this land of droughts and flooding rains.
Now, note how Barry doesn't overtly claim that anything I said was wrong. He just doesn't like anyone saying it. He prefers the climate of fear and alarm.
And regular commentator Liz Storer, who's on a mission to stamp out militant climate activism, was loudly in agreement.
What, we do nothing. We do nothing then. Like these floods, these fires are new, Chris. They have always been synonymous with living in Australia. This is nothing new for Australia.
It certainly is not.
It's nothing new.
Certainly is not. Granted that at Lismore they say it's a record flood since European settlement. That was a record. But you're always going to get some records generally.
Yes, they're only records after all, which means they are the worst floods ever in Lismore.
Well, no, he still doesn't get it, does he? The fact that it was a record was the clear fact that I shared, because that's what we do here. The highest floods since European settlement is the factual way I framed it. But Barry says worst floods ever, which is slightly different, isn't it? Slightly less accurate and, of course, impossible to prove. But I don't want to be too picky because in the end, Barry had to reluctantly admit reality.
There may well be some truth in what they say. Australia is a land of fire and flood. Building more dams might help in flood control.
Yeah, how about that? This bloke, paid a full-time salary and given 8 or 9 helpers to come up with 15 minutes of ideological warfare a week, actually admits that what I and others said on this station was right, was truthful. Yep, instead of using Media Watch to call out misinformation, he uses it to call out people who share factual information that he would rather censor or spin away or ignore for his own ideological reasons. How perverse. If Barry and Media Watch wanted to attack misinformation and contemptible journalism, why wouldn't they look at Four Corners? Over recent years, it's been up to its neck in the ugly, vindictive and erroneous trial by media of Cardinal George Pell, an innocent man. It's also destroyed the career of former Attorney General Christian Porter by airing historical, bizarre, unprovable allegations stemming from a complaint to police that was subsequently withdrawn, reports which triggered a fresh examination of documents by police who decided not to pursue an investigation. Gutter journalism and a sad development in our public life and the end of Christian Porter's career. Four Corners also scandalised former Education Minister Alan Tudge over a consensual affair between 2 adults that did not breach any rules or codes of conduct. That cost him a ministerial job. And if those episodes were not disgraceful enough, Four Corners ran a 3-part series that pretended Donald Trump was in collusion with Russia and that Trump was Vladimir Putin's puppet in the White House. A ridiculous conspiracy theory that's been proven not just to be wrong, but to be a partisan fabrication. I mention all these because this is the fertile ground where Media Watch and Paul Barry could actually call out journalistic misadventure by their taxpayer-funded colleagues and do some public good. But instead, when Four Corners executive producer Sally Neighbour announced yesterday that she was leaving, Barry tweeted that she had done a, quote, great job. There you have it. We pay the ABC more than $1 billion of taxpayers' money every year so they can invent an alternative reality. Nothing will change until a government bites the bullet.